Happy New Year. Welcome to 2019. This is Fancounters. My name's Nick.
And I'm Elizabeth.
And you can find us on Twitter at Fancounters Live, Facebook.com/Fancounters. And also you can email any comments, suggestions, or questions to
hello@fancounters.com.
We are thankful that you're here. If you like what you hear on today's program, go back, listen to our other shows. They're just as good. And share it with friends. That would help us out as well.
Yes, please.
If you truly want to be a Fancounters insider, head over to our Facebook group. Just search Sharpie Nation and join the discussion on Facebook. That's Sharpie Nation. It's our newest group and newest way you can communicate with the show. Now, Elizabeth, over this Christmas and New Year's break from school, I had my share of watching and catching up on my Hallmark Christmas movies. You know it's my favorite thing.
I know. I don't get it.
And they're all about the same thing. It's either somebody finding love at the last minute, then it gets misconstrued, so they break up with 5 minutes left in the movie, and then voila, they're back together. Or it's somebody saving something, saving the town, saving the Christmas festival, saving the Christmas play, or saving the factory.
I know, but even though we have heard from directors of these Hallmark Christmas movies who say they make them in less than 2 weeks, you still buy this?
Buy what?
You're obviously sucked into this 2-hour movie
yeah.
You are completely, your DVR is completely full of Hallmark Christmas movies.
Okay, so my niece is also into them. And she and I had a marathon of these movies about a week ago. She came over and we just watched them all day. Now, she told me there's an app for the Hallmark Christmas movies.
Oh, for goodness gracious
No, I'm serious.
sakes.
And what you can do is, it not only will it tell you every time they air, so you don't miss any, you check them off as you go. You click, I've watched. There's 37 of them this year. I'm going to be watching these through Valentine's Day.
I'm going to pass. I'll watch a few every once in a while, but this ranks up there with your weird obsession with scary movies. I don't get either one of them. I love you, but I don't get either one of them.
Well, after Valentine's Day, I got to start doing that.
Oh, for the love of God. Okay.
Oh, I love this time of year.
Oh.
Today on the show, we're going to find out what Christopher Knight is up to these days because he is our guest today.
Peter Brady.
You know, in doing research for this, too, I noticed these 6 people that were in the kids of this cast, they always will be known as kids. I mean, they're in their 60s, and people are still like, hey, the Brady kids. I've made the same mistake when I wrote up this opening. Today on the show, we're welcoming another TV icon, and this time, he's from the Brady Bunch. Christopher Knight is on the show, and you would know him best from his role as Peter Brady. Chris has enjoyed a lengthy television career, including his own reality show.
He recently launched a new way to buy quality furniture online with his own company, Christopher Knight Home. Today we're going to hear about his Brady memories and also his appearance with the young Hollywood television medium, Tyler Henry.
Now, do you know do you know who Tyler Henry is?
I do not.
He is this young guy. Maybe he's 19 years old, but he does psychic readings with the stars, and he doesn't like to know ahead of time who he's doing a reading for, but he conjures up dead people from their past, and he did that with Christopher Knight, bringing his father back to him. So I cannot wait. I haven't seen that, because here's the deal. It's on YouTube, but you have to pay $1.99.
What?
Yeah.
I thought YouTube was free.
No, some stuff is paid. So I don't know what happened with his father on that show, but we're going to find out today.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fancounters with Nick and Elizabeth on the PodFix network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom.
Can I take a picture? Oh, my God.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
Well, guess what? I have a big surprise for you.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Christopher Knight, welcome to Fancounters. Thanks for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Now, we have a lot to get to today, but first I want to start with your most recent Brady Bunch reunion, because it just happened. It was for a promo shoot that took place in front of the exterior home of your iconic TV show, and it was for HGTV.
It wasn't just a promo, though. It was actually, we were shooting the beginning of this series that HGTV is producing about the Brady home and its remodeling. So it's a DIY project, a very large DIY project.
Okay.
Now, I have a question about that, though, and I'm just wondering, are you guys actually doing the work? Like, are you helping on certain days, or was this a one-time shoot for you guys? Or can't you say?
It's, no, I can't. It's interesting. These are the very questions we had when we were being asked by the network to be involved. Of course, our curiosity was stimulated, and we'd ask the question, okay, how? How do you want us involved? Even the description of what the show was going to be wasn't really laid out until very late in the talks that we had, like weeks before, days before they wanted us to come down as they were beginning production. Though it was a little bit easier to anticipate what the show might be about than it was about how they were going to apply us to that. So the show is about this iconic view of the Brady house, which the audience will learn is not a house that we worked in.
Right.
The six of us, the nine of us, didn't know that house, didn't live in that house, don't have a connection to that house. Our connection to that house is the same as any other fan of the show, or anybody watching the show. What we knew of that house was the view that everyone else saw. Of course, we worked on a set. That is what we had intimacy with and familiarity with, which wasn't there. We never worked at that. The house that shows up as the establishing shot is just that. It was a photographic opportunity taken of a house that could conceivably be the very Brady house that you live in once you follow the Brady's home. And but having no familiarity with it meant that we also didn't know where it was. I didn't know until the 90s, late 90s. I mean, 25 years, 30 years after, we're off the air, I'm asking Lloyd Schwartz, oh, by the way, people are asking me all the time where this house is. Is it true? Is it over there in Studio City, or is it somebody else said that it was, in this other town? He says, no, it's over here in this. And then I drove by it. It's like, there it is. Yeah, how about that?
I've been there before. It's because it's the second most photographed house outside of the White House.
You're kidding.
That's what I hear, and I am happy to take that stat and believe it. I'm not sure who keeps those stats. I'm not sure they're well researched or vetted, but let's not challenge it. Okay, it's the second most photographed house
let's go with that.
In America. And I've worked there a couple of times doing stand-ups. In fact, one was for the Travel Channel, using the show was about famous locations that you can go visit if you're on a holiday in like Los Angeles. Where can you go and see things that you've seen on television? And one of those places was this Brady house. And as we're doing the stand-up in front of the house, here comes the woman who owned it. She was elderly at that time, and she came out of the house with a board, like a protest board, except for there was nothing on it, like a stick and a white foam core board. She was turning on her sprinklers, but she didn't need anyone taking a picture of her as she did that.
Oh my
gosh.
So
it was interesting, because that led some credence to the idea that it's photographed a lot because she has adopted this strategy to avoid people taking a picture of her when she happens to do something in the front yard. Annoyed, I guess, as she was over the years of people drive by taking photos, that she would have a poster board like that sitting by her front door was for her a natural way of existing in that house, which we all like to think our home is ours, and rather private. So it must have been a little annoying having bought that house, and probably not knowing at the time when she's buying it really what she's getting herself into until after escrow closes and she's living there for a few months. Nonetheless, going back to the original question, how are they going to apply us in this? I mean, the show is going to be about this outside, this visual of the house, and then you open the front door and you'll notice immediately it's a split level 1-story house, and it's not the Brady house on the inside. So the show and the challenge is building that, making it the Brady house. But if you do that, and the Brady house on the inside is a 2-story house, how do you do it without destroying the street elevation. Well, you can't, and there's your conundrum. There's your struggle. There is your DIY project, and so that's what the show's about. And then our application to it is we have the memories, mostly of the inside, of course, because we didn't know where the outside was, and an appreciation for the details and the stories that went on, while shooting the show.
So
that's what our value is to the show. We do some of the work, some of the demo work, but they have also used this opportunity to bring together, I think it's 7 of their designers. Let me get a list here. I actually have it. That are on their various other shows. For instance, the Drew and Jonathan Scott are both designers on this Brady remodel. And I think that the current title, though it could change, is Very Brady Renovation.
Okay.
You had never been in the house then before this day that you were shooting, right?
No, I had not. No, but it almost doesn't matter, right? What would there be if you opened that front door and the whole inside of the house was the Brady house? Well, that's not going to be the case. So you know that you're not going to have a consistency. If that's what you're expecting, you're going to be disappointed. I knew not to expect that. It didn't really matter what it was like on the inside, because no one ever worked there. It's the audience is going to walk through a door and say, okay, so this is what we're dealing with. It's certainly not the Brady house on the inside, although it did come from that same era. It was built in '59, I believe, and some of the materials and the design style still in the late '60s were similar, and so it had some feel for what the Brady house was, and it was a split level, but it wasn't the Brady house that we all know. That stairway is so iconic. You have to have a stairway.
Absolutely.
You have to have an orange kitchen, So it's that's not there.
What will they do with this house once it's renovated, though? Will the public get to go inside
at the end of this project?
Yeah. Is it going to be a museum?
No, it's not a museum. It's not a museum. It's in a neighborhood.
Well,
you can't. You're not going to be able to change the zoning to all of a sudden create a museum in a neighborhood like that. No, it's going to be a livable. It has to ultimately, at the end, be granted an occupancy permit. It has to be a fully functioning, livable house.
So I could buy this house and wake up in the Brady house every day?
Yeah, you could.
Not with your budget.
And there's probably plenty of people who want to do that. It's going to cost them quite a bit if HGTV is looking to make back at least part of its money, because they spent well over what the house was valued at to end up with as the winning bidder. And of course, they're going to put a lot of money in to create the house that everyone knew as the Brady house on the inside. And
so they're getting
it won't be a perfect replica. It can't be, but there's a an insistence that we get as close to accurate as possible.
So I'm getting 1960s appliances, or I'm getting 2018 appliances?
It's a good question. I think you have to watch to find out.
Okay.
I don't know if you can truly get. Well, there could be some renovated appliances out there, but not very many. And what's the luck in getting the very one that you're looking for? I think you're looking at either new appliances that are styled sort of from that period, which is sort of coming back into vogue. And there's been numbers of conversations about the materials. We have a giant improvement in materials that one can build with today versus 50 years ago.
Right.
Does one want to go back and use the old materials, or does one want to use newer materials that harken back, that sort of like a modern spin on the Brady house, or a new spin? And you'll have to see what they come up with, because I think that different people have different approaches to that. Ultimately, though,
I want to go back and ask a different question. So you're with the Brady kids, and we talked about that in the opening, that we're so sorry that at 50 years later you're still being referred to as a kid. So what are the reunions like for you when you get together with the cast? Is it much like a close family reunion, or is it kind of like more of an awkward high school reunion?
No, not at all an awkward high school reunion. I mean, these are friends that sort of I grew up with because I was 10 to 16, living with them for a good 6 to 9 months, not living with them per se, but being with them almost every day for 6 to 9 months during those years of my life. That's a pretty important period for making bonds that last a very long time, sort of like the bonds you make with your brothers and sisters. And I don't know anybody other than my own brother, my own sister, for as many years. I don't have any friends from elementary school that I still am current with. But I've known Barry for 50 years. We did the pilot 50 years ago last month.
Wow.
It'll be a 50-year anniversary for the show next year, but for us it's this year. And Eve, Mike, Susan, same thing. Maureen. We've all known each other for that many years, and it doesn't really matter that there could be years between seeing each other. When getting back together, it's almost as though no time has elapsed. And I've gone through some period of separation from my own family and then back together, and it's not as though that time changed anything.
Is it true that you guys
pick it right back up?
Is it true that you guys hadn't done like an actual reunion in 15 years?
Well, what do you mean by actual?
Well, like a public reunion.
You could probably answer that question saying we've never done an actual reunion.
Okay.
There has never been an actual, let's just say, a version of the Brady Bunch where we were all participant and working together ever. Other than, I don't even think the Brady Brides had us. They might have had us all back together for one of their episodes. But other than that, that was not that many years after the show. It might have been 10 years. I can't remember what the year was that they did the Brady. I think it was like 81. And we were, so that's 7 years after we broke up from the original series. But after that, there has been nothing that we have worked on playing in character, where we've all been back together. Now, we did get back together 15 years ago on TV Land to do a 35-year sort of retrospective, and that included the six of us and Florence.
Okay.
And I think Anne might have been part of that too, which was the only other time that we all kind of got back together, but we weren't playing characters. We were just reminiscing. Even then, it's hard to bring us all in the room together. There are some, Barry, Susan, Michael, and myself, when somebody asks us to do something, we're of the mind, there's no harm in it. But different people have different approaches, and there's other members who are either more resistant or more reluctant and don't find the reason to get back together compelling enough. And there hasn't been since that 15 years any reason for others to say yes when there has been opportunities to get together. This one, though, became compelling enough.
Okay, so that was my question. For the HGTV, who was there?
Well, it was all 6 kids.
All 6 showed up.
All 6 kids. All remaining cast members. We
all
wish
that's
that Bob
left.
and Florence and Ann could have been there. They may have been there in spirit, and perhaps on future days when we'll shoot again, they will be.
Okay.
But we were all there together on that first day of shooting when they had all 8 of their hosts also in attendance.
Okay.
So it's a pretty big cast when it's all pulled together. And I believe we'll all be together at the end for the christening.
Yes.
Maybe a christening meal. I don't know what there will be at the end. And again, this is not a show that will air until September if all goes according to plan. They have, in my mind, they have an entire house to build. It's not like there's a lot of the house that will remain standing. So they have a big project in front of them to actually build in this time frame, and building it in kind of television time, which is sometimes very compressed. You know, that's the one thing about watching television and things like this you don't really get a sense of is what was the timing of it all. But because of budgets being what they are, you try to do things as quickly as possible, and that's why the building of a home from beginning to end is not something that's normally carried on a reality type documentary project over the course of one season, because from beginning to end, it's normally a 2-year process. So that would be multiple seasons. But in this case, they're going to try to compress the building time so that we can get it in one season.
Through the magic of television.
Yes.
Yeah. But, I mean, it's interesting that we have been asked to do this. When I heard that they were buying the house, or that it was HGTV that bought the house, you know, at that point, we weren't involved in it at all. And I'd get all these texts from people, hey, you should buy the house. You'd been in the house, when they were saying it was for sale. And then we find out it's HGTV. And then people say, you should get on the show. Well, you know, I don't know what HGTV is going to do with it, but I'm curious as well. I mean, I assumed that what their plan was going, HGTV, with all their renovation, you know, shows clearly that this is one of those remodels or renovations to bring it back to its former glory. But I, like the other cast members, knew that it wasn't a house that would be the Brady house as soon as you open the front door. So they had a lot of work to do. I was assuming that was going to be sort of the plot, and it turned out that it was. But I'm still scratching my head because I know how big a job it is. But I would have watched it. You know, because I'm thinking, okay, if that's what they have to do, I'm just curious how they're going to do it, let alone the time frame.
Well, I'll be watching.
So, yeah, I mean, you need to, because it's truly epic.
Now, before we go back to some Brady questions, I kind of want to bring the audience back to where you are right now in your life. You have recently pursued an entrepreneurial interest. You've created Christopher Knight Home. So I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about how that began and what we can find if we go to ChristopherKnightHome.com.
I've created actually 2 brands, Christopher Knight Home and a burgeoning new brand called Christopher Knight Collection. This actually flows from my previous years in the 80s, 90s, and early new millennium. Working in the high-tech industry, because I left show business and for 20 years was an executive in the computer space, in the computer peripheral space since like 87 through 2002. And that got me, I didn't know I was leaving entertainment when I did that, but of course all of a sudden I found myself with employees and others, investors and so forth, who trusted you weren't going to just, you know, drop all your responsibilities because somebody gave you a job. It wasn't like I could go out on interviews and look for a new series.
Right.
So I found myself actually having left the entertainment industry without even realizing it. And I spent 20 years there, and it was a great ride. And I realized that it was exercising parts of myself that I always knew. I would have never been an actor if I had left, if it didn't find me and sort of carry me forward as it did as a child. Though it was something my dad did, it wasn't something that I was naturally inclined to have any curiosity in. It would have been more in the sciences, and so when I got into the computer, business, it was more or less, sort of with all those engineers and so forth. It was sort of a natural place for me to be, so I took to it very quickly and very easily, and was nurtured by it a great deal. So when leaving it, after being at a good place, where a company that had bought our company, and I had to go along with it for a number of years, and that contract was then over, and I was living up in the Bay Area, and now it was time to come back to LA. Decided, okay, let me now that I'm going back to LA, let me just investigate the entertainment industry, because I never had an intention to completely leave it behind. But it would be nice if I could actually blend both, the business world with my entertainment space. It's as opposed to having to do one or the other. Mm-hmm. They're both rather nurturing, and they're kind of polar, and sort of like going to school needs a summertime to chill from school, and then once summer's run its course, you're looking forward to going back to school. There's a natural sequence in things when an ebb and flow is a good, it's like a breathing lung. There's good that can come from things that are contrasting but compatible. And so I was hoping that maybe if coming back to Los Angeles and getting involved in the entertainment industry again, that perhaps there was a part of my business world that I could maintain or rebuild or build new, that could live in existence with it, manage them both simultaneously without having to give one up for the other. And I first found that getting back in the entertainment industry was a blast and new, because now we had this reality stuff, and that stuff started just happening to me upon coming back to LA. And I was missing a little bit of my business world. I'd still be involved in companies, but not at a point that where I had to manage employees. It was more from a board level or investor level.
Okay.
And then an old partner of mine called me up and said, "Listen, this is what I've been doing." And he's now in this furniture space where their company was growing. They had gotten involved he'd gotten involved as a consultant to another gentleman who himself been in the furniture business for a while. But this individual recognized that the future could be in online for furniture, as it had sort of been the case with everything else, at least small boxed items. But furniture was sort of lagging behind because of its nature. It's just bigger and harder to actually compel people to buy furniture. It's easier to have them buy a piece of electronic gear. Mm-hmm. Every box is going to be the same for that model. But furniture is a little bit different, and takes a little bit different online tools and presence to sell furniture. But he did believe it was possible, and he was going to pitch his tent there, move all of his business from brick and mortar. He never had stores, but he sold to stores, so he imported a lot. And then he was going to work with those individuals out there, those online accounts that saw furniture as their future and invested in the right tools. And Overstock was the first to actually do that. Unlike just recently, Amazon started turning their attention to furnishings and providing the kind of contextual data that's necessary to sell furniture. It can't be just you saw a picture of it and a little bit of what it is. You had to have a lot of information on furniture to get people to pull the trigger. But yeah. Overstock was doing that. They sort of aligned themselves with that kind of approach so that furniture could sell and sell in quantity. And this company that my friend was now a consultant for was in need of a brand, and he called me up and gave me this opportunity. He said, "Listen, we'd love to use you as the face of a brand, your name and your face on this brand." And I don't really get involved in things unless I'm sort of deeply involved in them. And so we created the brand, and we ran it first on Overstock, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. So it is the type of furniture that is there is it's more of an emporium. It's not sort of a collection of mine. It doesn't have a design style necessarily. What the belief in this, firstly, is the physical limitations of furniture when it's sold online, that it's got to be shipped, and the biggest expense in furniture is that shipping. You can present a whole lot of opportunity online, because one of the problems with furniture is that whenever you go to a retail spot, what you see on the floor is what they had space for, right, not what's available. So you end up looking through books anyway. So online can actually present all that's available much more readily. But then you have to get it to the person, and that's where the big expense really, gets crazy. Just shipping it to you becomes 3/4 of the cost of that stick of furniture. So FedEx and the overnight delivery with furniture is possible as long as it fits within the dim weights and measures of the shipper, if it's FedEx or UPS, whomever it is. Because if it doesn't, the price of that shipping is 5-10x for shipping. So if something is shipped $70 with FedEx in 2 days, it can't go in that box, and it's going to ship with a normal trucking company, but it's not going to cost $70. The shipping on it alone is going to cost $700-800. So it changed. I mean, if you're buying something for $200 and you're adding $700 to it, it's skewing.
I'm going to pass on that piece of furniture. I think it
well,
has to
and
be
that's
hard.
what happens. And you end up buying it, though. You end up buying that furniture from somebody local because at least there's no shipping charge for it.
Right.
But there's still a cost associated with them getting it.
True.
Right.
They had, at some point along the way, it had to get shipped. So anything that has to move that way is going to be far more expensive. Well, we're now in a period of time where if you as we did, we specialized in those things that could find a box that, could be broken down, called KD, knockdown, so that a couple of bolts and it's put together. A chair comes in, 4 pieces: the seat, the back, and 2 legs. You screw those 4 pieces together, and you got a chair.
Yeah.
Ottomans, they're square. They fit in the box. They're not that heavy. There's no building necessary. Maybe you got to screw in 4 legs, or 4 wheels. That all can go FedEx, and all of a sudden you're selling furniture that would have been normally sold in a store for $500-600, and you're selling it for $150, $170. Well, there's a great deal of desire for people to buy furniture more cheaply, and this company was designing its future on furniture that could be shipped inside of those weights and measures that the shipper designated. So let's specialize in that. That means that we're not specialists in big sofa sets, but outdoor sofa sets, yes, because they're lighter weight and come in as sectionals and fit in the boxes. So those things that can be shipped overnight and show up on your door that are shipped for free, literally the price that you're paying for it includes the cost of shipping, was the business that we were specialists in. So we weren't making Christopher Knight Home a brand that sold on a design style, but literally on a physical characteristic. It just kept growing. I mean, there's an insatiable appetite out there for furniture that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. And if you look at the history of, because I'm an abuser of this too, of furniture, you end up pulling the trigger on something. You spend more than you wanted to. So when you move, of course, you don't want to, there's no value to it to somebody else. I mean, it's not even just 1/10 of its value is left. It's much less than that. So it breaks your heart. It kills you. It said, no, I'm not going to sell it for that. I'll put it into storage.
I'd rather pay a monthly fee on it.
It's in storage for 20 years, and you spend a fortune on storage because you spent that much on a piece of furniture. I think we're all wanting sort of our lifestyles to be able to be reconfigured without feeling like we wasted a whole lot of resource. And so if what we can do is not present that obstacle, in other words, give you furniture that is more, furniture is a durable good. Mm-hmm. But we're sort of looking at it like, and this is a crazy way to describe it, but it's a disposable.
It is.
But it's disposable like clothes is disposable. And if you look at what happened with clothes over the last century, you'll see the same thing that's now happening with furniture. And we are a purveyor of an attitude that your furniture is an expression of yourself and needs to fit in your environment. And your environment, unlike 100 years ago or maybe 50 years ago, people move a lot more. You need to be portable, and your furniture shouldn't be an anchor for you. And then look at outdoor furniture, which wasn't part of our mix originally. It came in maybe 4 years ago. Christopher Knight Home is now going on 8 years old. And outdoor furniture became even bigger than indoor furniture for us because everything outdoor can ship in the FedEx. And nobody in the outdoor space they're already aligned to the idea that something outside isn't going to last forever.
Especially here where we are in Milwaukee.
Exactly. So unless you really, really take really good care of it, and even then, everything is out in the sun when it's sunny. Or, if you're the ocean, you got the salt spray. Nothing on your house lasts forever. I mean, you're going to change that roof in 20 years. You're going to have to repaint in 8 to 10 years. So people on the outside, I mean, you got to do it on the inside too, but at least on the outside, they're recognizing that there are elements at play that degrade everything that you own, and so you're going to have to replace it. And so people are willing to replace it if they didn't have to spend so much money on it in the first place. So that's what we've presented. We've presented very high quality but affordable furniture that doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg because it shipped. That all the money was sunk in the transport costs. And as a result, people sort of look at their furniture as I'm thinking. I don't think they're consciously thinking of this, but this is what happened with clothing. I mean, my grandfather, he died in late 80s, but he was 100 at that time, so he was born in the 1880s. But
yeah,
I was absolutely floored when seeing what it was that he owned at his passing in the 80s, and he had an armoire, maybe 2 feet across. And inside there were all his clothes. He didn't have, a huge walk-in closet of clothes. He didn't need it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, but he wasn't any different than anybody else that grew up with him. Clothes works. I mean, you remember darning socks? When was the last time you heard someone say, darn a sock, or knew someone that even suggested it? Or maybe people today don't even know what that means.
I don't know what that means.
I know what it is, but I'm not doing it, so I just throw the sock away. Because
right.
I used to
throw the sock away. Why did people darn socks 150, 75 years ago?
Because you just didn't do that.
Because the sock was expensive.
Right.
As a percentage of your income, there was you got as much wear out of everything as you could, and you didn't have 20 pair of everything. I mean, you had 3 good pair of slacks, you had 2 jackets, you had, a couple of pair of work clothes. Your shoes, you probably had 4 pair of shoes. I don't know anybody today that has 4 pair of shoes. It's just because the cost of clothes as a percentage of your income has been driven so far down that clothes themselves are expendable or disposable, and they have another element to them, and that is the design. The design constantly changes. Not that us guys are that sensitive to it,
no.
but you women are.
Yes.
I mean, you're motivated by it every year. There's a new sort of style, if you want to stay stylish, that you need to adapt. But you can afford to now because the cost of the clothes aren't such that you have to hold on to them forever and fix every hole, darn every sock if it wears out early. You just get rid of it. You pass it along, pass it down, or simply turn it into, refuse. And the same thing is occurring with furniture. Oh. The only way that can happen is if the cost of the furniture at the front end doesn't require it to be an heirloom.
Very true.
And that means then once it's not that costly and thought of as something of an heirloom, then you can trade it out, move it along, get rid of it when times change, either physically, emotionally, stylistically. For whatever reason, you're no longer tied like an anchor to a costly item. You have reasonably expensive furniture, not expensive at all, a reasonable cost good that you can detach from when your lifestyle decides that it's necessary. And at the same time, it's not because it's so cheap. We're not making stuff that'll break, and that's the reason you have to throw it away. It's stuff that you should have plenty of years with, but you're not going to have that mental connection to it that you would if you spent thousands of dollars for it.
Oh, I totally get that.
And that's what we're tapping into.
I would love to get into some Brady Bunch stuff if you're okay with that.
Okay, absolutely.
All right. So when you get an interview request like ours, is it kind of hard for you to figure out, man, it's been so many years since the show's been on the air. Is it hard to understand the curiosity that still exists around the show?
Well, it's not that. I mean, I think the hardness of understanding curiosity was something that occurred for 10 years following the show. The surrender to that happened after 10 years, and now it's sort of it's charming. It's an honor to have people still curious about it. To have been in a position, close to it like this it has been a gift and something that there's nothing hard about it at all. It's hard to remember sometimes some of the episodes, and certainly it's not in the front of my mind until somebody pulls it back out. But I recognize that people have an attachment to it, and we're kind of representative of a lot of genre, and we're the face of it. And I want to be responsible to that. We are sort of the quintessential American family, and we were already being produced as the Bradys in the late '60s, a throwback to the late '50s, and how families were. We were already a little passé, or behind the times that I was living in as a child. The family was, it was the kind of family we all wish for. That, maybe it never really. Well, I hear from people that did exist. We have two different audiences. We have two different polar sides of an audience, or the equation. Families that were just like the Bradys, and they loved the Brady Bunch because it was sort of just like them. Mm-hmm. Big, functioning unit. And then latchkey kids who had no brothers and sisters, and maybe one parent. But we were a surrogate family. So they were part of our family. And in all cases, we were part of everyone's family. And there's been a little bit of a breakdown in sort of family fabric. To some, maybe a number of generations don't even know what it really is, and only get it through the Brady Bunch and other shows like that. And I think there's a longing for that kind of belonging, because that's what the Brady Bunch really is about. I know it's about kids, but it's really, Sherwood had, he had 2 giant hits, and he had a third series that was similar to the other 2 that lasted just 13 weeks, and it was called It's About Time. And if you look about, I don't know if you remember that show, but it's about time, it's about space. Astronauts get I don't know where they end up. It's sort of like
like Lost in Space?
I Dream of Jeannie, but I think they get stuck in space. I think, if I remember correctly, I believe the series was about 68. Might have been 67, but they blast up and they get stuck in space. Like you could live there. Nonetheless, let's not let the logic kill the story here.
Don't think
all 3 of these shows, the Brady Bunch, Gilligan's Island, and It's About Time, have the same message. It's about getting along and being forced, different people being forced together and having to figure out how to get along. And even the Brady Bunch, which seems like a family, but you have to go back to the very beginning to realize they weren't.
Right. It's a blended family.
And it could have been, in today's day, if you blended a family, wanted it to be a little bit more real or more drama, there would be constant recognition throughout the show that you weren't really brothers and sisters.
Right.
That's your mom. That's not my mom. That's where the drama would be. That's the head of the pin. That's where they, And fortunately for us, it wasn't about that at all. It was about the getting along part. So we forgot about not being a family. There was never any mention that you weren't my mom, or you're not my sister. It was ignored after the first, 13 episodes.
Yeah, because that was not my blended family experience.
What's that?
I said that was not my blended family experience at all.
Right.
I would watch reruns of the Brady Bunch going, why isn't my life like this?
These brothers and sisters suck.
Well, you know something? And what's really screwed up is, I didn't have a blended family, but I had an atomic family, not a nuclear family. And there was nothing about the Brady Bunch that was reminiscent or familiar to me from the life I lived. But in looking at it from my adult perspective, back on some of the things you drag through life that were caused from the way you, the relationship you had in your family, you recognize that having a Brady family, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
You probably would be a healthier person to have a family like that. I was 2 years from being, when the show went off the air, I would have, maybe a year and a half from being eligible to be drafted. Yet,
wow.
all of that. I mean, look at. They're talking. I mean, we got a lot of social issues and discourse today that seems to represent that we've reached a low point. But the late '60s, early '70s were lower. We had this war going on and all this, and we're being produced during it. That's the most interesting thing of all to me is during the most cataclysmic social upheaval or period in our country's history, even more so than today, this little show is being produced. Mm-hmm. That has nothing to do with any of that. It didn't get caught up in any of that. You couldn't have a show that wasn't caught up in any of that if it was about adults. But when it's about kids aren't about war, other than being caught up in it and being victims to it, but they're about another location in which they're trying to figure out where they belong. And that's home. And that's all the show was about. And as simple as it was, as much as it could have been done, rendered as a cartoon, because it was rather simple, the brilliance was in its simplicity. Yeah. It's the reason it still lasts today. Because as I look back on it, and I've had the question, why is the Brady Bunch still important to people? Why do people and I believe it's because everyone's filtered through it. It's an early life filter. The kids 4 to 12 gone through it, watched it, reminded them of home, and gave them a place, an identity. It showed family functioning properly, and I think all kids sort of have a sense when it's functioning properly and when it's not. But if they had not had an example of a functioning family, they at least point to the Bradys as one, because they wouldn't have any inkling. They would just know something's wrong with their own, because that's what I went through. Yeah. And my mom hated the Brady Bunch because it wasn't real. What was real wasn't as good as what. Why can't we be more like that?
The TV version was better.
And when she would tell me there was no families like that, but then I'd find out from the history, looking back on it, having these conversations with fans calling in and saying, well, our family was just like that. And it wasn't like that was an exception. It was as much the rule. Certainly there was the others like myself didn't grow up like that, but it was a balance. My mom was wrong. It's not like there was no family like that. That was her defense, probably because she felt that she had no control over it not being any better than it was. But no aspiration to try to make it better either. That having this thing as an ideal didn't make her life any easier. It's sort of like the Soviet way of working, or maybe the Chinese. Don't give them internet to see how the rest of the world lives, because that'll make it harder for us.
Ignorance is bliss.
So you did an interview last year on NBC with Barry Williams, Michael Lookinland, and Susan Olsen, and you were asked when you first realized that you were never going to be able to separate yourself from being Peter Brady. You mentioned that it hit you kind of in your 20s, but were you being typecast, or were you simply not being cast because the directors only saw you as Peter Brady?
I don't think people would even see Peter Brady today, because a lot of the audience out there doesn't even really remember who that was, and I certainly don't. For those people that had a cursory understanding of or know the show but don't know it intimately, when I walk into a room, I don't remind them of that, of that 11-year-old. Well, there's something that's going to happen in entertainment that I have no answer for. It's an interesting conundrum, but the more. So, as an unemployed actor, you hope to work. On anything, you just hope to be able to make a living at it, and then, if you're lucky enough, you get hired, and that job begets another job. But if you get in the series, now you become a star, and that's probably what you originally were hoping for. I can't see how you wouldn't have been hoping for that. But what you probably didn't see before even hoping for that is that now that success is going to come with some entanglement. It can. And that can be that now your success makes it harder after that success is over. It's sort of like, living off of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. After you're done with your run of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, you probably want something else for a while.
Yeah.
And that's how I think the audience or those that do the hiring look at it. There's also the tendency today to perhaps even overuse people who have been used before because at least it worked before. There's so much expense in creating something that you want to start out with maybe somebody who has an attachment to an audience and you want to utilize them for that audience. And so perhaps today, less than when I was, in my 20s, and there was more resistance to using somebody who was familiar, except for the name star at the top. Today, there's a lot of reuse, more so than there was in my day. And that just came with the territory. Yeah, so you're going to be typecast. But what are you going to do about that? I wanted to leave it behind. I thought it was over, and with it being over, now I could grow up, and it wouldn't be an influence. It wouldn't be a rudder or an anchor or anything. It would just dissipate. But it never dissipated. It never ended. And I had to go to Australia to figure it all out when I was in my period of not wanting Brady to intersect my life anymore, like I had control over it. Everywhere I went, people recognized me. Yeah. So I really didn't have any control over it. All I could do is hide. I thought when this opportunity, I was in the high-tech industry, and the opportunity came up for us to be in Australia for a week at some kind of convention there. Mm-hmm. And thought, okay, Australia. It was 91 or so. Okay. So, I mean, it's been some years.
Yeah.
Right? So the Brady Bunch went off in 74, so it's now, and I was 16, so I'm in my 30s at this point. I'm in late 20s. I'm thinking maybe it was a little bit earlier than that. I know it had to be like 90, 91, 89, somewhere around in there. And I'm going to Australia. Now, I had some idea that we'd gotten some fan mail from Australia, so I knew that the show played there. But I figured, okay, I'm going to go to Australia. This is going to be cool, because I kind of did live my life like I didn't want to be recognized. I just didn't want this Brady thing, to raise its head. So, sort of like head down, hat on, glasses on, and just try not to make eye contact with anybody they recognize you. Well, it's a difficult way to live one's life, day in, day out. But I'm going to Australia. This will be fun. No one will recognize me. I can completely just, I don't have to worry about any of that. I didn't get through customs without being recognized. And they asked me if I was there for the play, and I'm thinking I'm completely lost. What are you talking about? It was the Real Live Brady Bunch. Was in Australia and opening that weekend. That happened to be there. Now I'm thinking, okay, so the gods are playing with me. This is too much of a coincidence. Now, when I was asked to go to the play, which I think was the year before in Los Angeles, where I lived, I didn't go. I didn't want to go. The last place in the world I wanted to be. I was a reluctant Brady. I mean, I didn't want to. I thought, okay, I'm just gonna let this thing die. Now this play is up, and no, I don't want to be in the watching an episode of the Brady Bunch from inside the theater. I didn't have the appreciation that the audience did for the show. My position was I wanted it to end so that I could get on with my life.
Right.
Common refrain. But when this happened in Australia, and now I'm half a world away, and it's an interesting thing. It's the first time I'd been to Australia. I'm on the other side of the equator. Never done that before. Never been that far from home before. And there's just, the world gets smaller with a lot of travel. Everybody should travel more, and you realize that things aren't as foreign as you make them in your own mind. The world is a big place, but it's not that big. And Australia was a long way away, and it. Part of that is not a loneliness, but an appreciation at that point how small you are in the world when you go to a place that is so far away. And here it is. I'm going through customs, and people are knowing who I am, and I'm a half a world away.
That's got to be
just
weird.
Kind of a mind-blowing experience. And then there's this play, and they're wanting me to go. And then the news is calling me, and I wasn't even staying in a hotel. I was staying at our distributor's home that lived in Australia and in Sydney. And I relented. I said, okay, I'll go. Mm-hmm. And it was they put a couch in the front row, because the whole theater was not just chairs; it was like living room furniture. And I watched this thing, and the poor kid who had to play Peter was so nervous. But it didn't really matter. I mean, I never saw the play. I kind of understood the concept was, transposed episodes of the show. And it was cute. It was adorable. But what was for me was how the audience just lapped it up, and how for them it was a callback. It was a way to remember their childhood, and I was being applauded and showered with love. That's when I realized, it's like to run away from this is trying to cut off your arm. And it's always going to be there. I can't run from it. No matter where I go, it's there before me. And when I pass away, it's going to be there after me. So it is bigger than I am. It's like trying to avoid sun or light.
Good luck with
that. It's impossible. So why exhaust oneself in trying to do that? And secondly, all that you get from it is love and brotherhood. To be considered by everybody their brother, in a way, I guess I understand that, because everyone was part of our family. We were part of everyone else's family. So as an extension of that, I am a part of everyone's family, and I get treated like that. And that's that's odd. It's truly odd to live like that, but it's an honor. And so I just had to tweak it. I had to put it into focus that both of those, that running from it was exhausting, and running toward it was what would you call that? It was enlivening. It was loving. It was supportive. It was. Why would one want to run from that? Now, it's
especially when they're showering you with love.
But what it is that I have the same appreciation for these people that they have for me, for the position that I'm in. In other words, I'm aligning myself with what they're seeing the show. Now, I maybe wasn't a fan of the show because it wasn't really designed for me, and I worked on it.
Right.
But I can see where they're tapped in, and I knew, now as an adult better than I did as a kid, how messed up my own personal family was, and it would have been nicer to have been more like the Brady Bunch, and how much more I am a better person because I had this parallel family that actually filled in for the family I did have. That was, in other words, I would have been, I think, more emotionally unstable if it wasn't for the fact that I had this weird scripted family that provided that foundation. And I was able to blend my real life with my show life or families and create a wholeness that allowed me to be a whole person later. But I was borrowing a lot of that, not from real family, but from Sherwood's idea family. And, I owed this show. I owed, although I didn't necessarily watch it like the fans did, I was in it. I owed a lot to having it be in my life. So, and it was there that I could see it. It took that separation, being far away, feeling small, and then feeling like even though I'm this small, I got all these friends. I got people who want nothing but to express an appreciation, and I think that's what we live for.
Well, we didn't expect it to go so long, but Chris has got a lot to say. Yeah. And, great stories, and we didn't want to stop the answers, so we're going to carry this one into next week.
Yeah, just so much to say. To be quite honest, I didn't know what to expect, after we had done kind of the Jerry Mathers one, where Jerry was, super excited to relive those years because he felt that those were, videos of his life. Mm-hmm. Chris was much more the opposite, kind of I kind of remember those episodes. I don't really pay that much attention to it. So it was very nice to see those two different perspectives that we've had on the show. He's obviously a very intelligent man. And has been successful in business, and so he's got a lot to share.
We hit a lot of things with the HGTV show this week. We talked about his endeavor into the furniture space, And next week, we're going to go right back and hit all the hard Brady Bunch questions.
Yeah, it's gonna be all Brady the next hour.
Yeah, and he's got a lot of neat things to tell us about some behind the scenes of the show and a lot of those burning questions you might have in the back of your mind. We are going to answer next week as we continue with Christopher Knight. You can follow us on Twitter at Fancounters Live. Don't forget to send us an email with your comments, questions, or show suggestions, and you can send those to
hello@fancounters.com.
And we will talk to you
next week. Bye.
This was a podcast from the PodFix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.
Hey guys, it's me again. If you've reached this part of the podcast, we know that you're a super fan. And if you want to have all the inside information on what's coming up on this show and also a way to interact with the show and all the fans, head over to Sharpie Nation on Facebook. That's SHARPIE Nation, and join that group. We'd love to have you over there and be able to communicate with you there. Now, next week on the show, Christopher Knight is going to dive into all those pressing Brady Bunch questions, including why does it seem like Eve Plum doesn't want to join in on these reunion things? It's not for the reason you think, and you'll find out next week. Join us then.